The fluorescent lights of the pharmacy felt too bright, almost mocking in their cheerfulness. Rebecca stood at the counter, her worn purse clutched against her chest like a shield. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders, making it hard to breathe. Behind the counter, the pharmacist's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, his face neutral and professional. "That'll be $847.32, he said, his voice neither unkind nor particularly sympathetic, just matter-of-fact like he was reading off the weather forecast. Rebecca's stomach dropped. She'd known it would be expensive. Medicine always was, but she'd hoped, prayed even, that maybe this time it would be different. Maybe there'd been a mistake last month. Maybe her insurance would finally kick in properly. Maybe anything would make this number smaller. "I'm sorry, could you check that again?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended, almost childlike. "My insurance should cover most of it." The pharmacist, whose name tag read Tom, gave her a look she'd seen too many times before. Pity mixed with helplessness. He clicked through several screens, his reading glasses sliding down his nose slightly. "Ma'am, I've run it 3 times. Your insurance covers 60%, which brings it down from over $2,000. This is with the coverage applied." Rebecca's hand instinctively moved to her wallet, even though she already knew what she'd find there. $126. That was it. That was all that stood between her and Friday's paycheck, which was already earmarked for rent that was now 3 days overdue. Her landlord, Mr. Patterson, had been patient, but his patience was wearing thin. She'd seen it in his eyes when she'd promised the money by this weekend. From the corner of her eye, she could see her daughter, Lily, sitting in the waiting area. 7 years old, small for her age, with light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail that Rebecca had hastily done that morning. The child was hunched over slightly, her breathing coming in those short, shallow bursts that made Rebecca's heart clench with fear. Lily's inhaler had run out 2 days ago, and the wheezing had started again last night. By this morning, her lips had that slightly blue tinge that sent Rebecca into a panic. "Is there a generic version?" Rebecca asked, hating how desperate she sounded. "Or maybe a payment plan. I can pay something now and the rest later." Tom shook his head slowly. "This is already the generic, ma'am. And for medications, we need payment in full." "I'm sorry. Company policy." Behind her, Rebecca could feel the presence of other customers waiting in line. She could sense their impatience, their lives pressing forward while hers seemed to be collapsing inward. Someone coughed. Another person shuffled their feet. The pressure of their waiting eyes made her face flush hot with embarrassment. "I understand," she said, though she didn't, not really. How could anyone understand a system where a child's ability to breathe was locked behind a price tag that might as well have been $1 million? Could you hold it? Just until Friday? I get paid Friday and I can come right back." Tom's expression softened. "I can hold it for 24 hours. After that, it goes back into inventory. But ma'am, with respect, it's Tuesday. Friday's 3 days away. 3 days. 72 hours. Rebecca looked over at Lily again. Her daughter was trying so hard to be brave, to sit still and quiet like Mommy had asked. But Rebecca could see the fear in those big brown eyes. The way Lily's small hand pressed against her chest as if she could manually force her lungs to work properly. 3 days might as well be 3 years. "Right," Rebecca said, her voice cracking despite her best efforts to hold it together. "Okay, thank you for checking. I'll figure something out." She turned away from the counter, blinking rapidly against the tears that threatened to spill over. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of all these people. Not in front of Lily. Her daughter needed her to be strong, to be the adult, to fix this somehow. The line behind her had grown to 5 people now. An elderly man with a cane, a young woman texting on her phone, a harried-looking mother with a toddler on her hip, and right behind where she'd been standing, a man in his mid-50s wearing an expensive-looking navy suit. He wasn't on his phone like most people in lines these days. Instead, he was simply standing there, patient and still, his hands clasped in front of him. There was something about his posture that suggested he was used to waiting, used to observing. Rebecca barely registered him as she walked toward Lily, trying to arrange her face into something that wouldn't scare her daughter, trying to look like everything was going to be okay even though she had no idea how. "Mama?" Lily's voice was raspy, strained from the effort of breathing. "Did you get it?" Rebecca knelt down in front of her daughter, smoothing back a strand of hair that had escaped from the ponytail. Lily's forehead was warm to the touch. The fever was back. Not yet, sweetheart. Mama needs to make a phone call first, okay? We're going to fix this. But even as she said the words, Rebecca's mind was racing through impossible calculations. She could call her sister, but Jessica was barely making ends meet herself with 3 kids and a husband who'd just been laid off. Her mother lived on Social Security and was already helping as much as she could by watching Lily after school. Rebecca had no credit cards. Those had been maxed out and defaulted on 2 years ago during the divorce. Her ex-husband Daniel owed 6 months of child support and had changed his number. She could try calling the hospital, begging them to see Lily in the emergency room. But the last time they'd gone to the ER for an asthma attack, the bill had been over $3,000. She was still making $20 monthly payments on that one, and it barely made a dent in the balance. "Excuse me." The voice was quiet but firm, coming from behind her. Rebecca turned to see the man in the navy suit standing there. Up close, she could see he had kind eyes, deep brown with small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often. His hair was mostly black with distinguished gray at the temples. There was something calming about his presence, something that made him seem trustworthy despite being a complete stranger. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to intrude," he said, his voice gentle. "But I couldn't help overhearing at the counter." Rebecca's face flushed with fresh embarrassment. Of course he'd heard. Everyone had heard. Her private humiliation had been a public spectacle. "It's fine," she said quickly, standing up and instinctively positioning herself between this stranger and Lily. "We're managing." "Thank you." "I'm sure you are," the man said, not moving any closer, respecting her space. "But I'd like to help if you'll allow me. The medication your daughter needs. Please let me take care of it." For a moment, Rebecca's brain couldn't process what he was saying. Let him take care of it? As in pay for it? The full amount? She stared at him, trying to understand if this was some kind of joke or scam. "I can't," she said automatically. "I can't accept that. I don't even know you." "You don't need to know me," he replied simply. "Your daughter needs her medicine now, not in 3 days. That's all that matters." Rebecca shook her head, even as part of her wanted to collapse with relief at the offer. "That's very kind, but it's almost $850. I can't take that much money from a stranger. I'll figure something out." The man's expression grew more serious, though not unkind. "Will you? In the next hour? Because that's how long your daughter has before her breathing gets worse. I saw her when you came in and I see her now. She's deteriorating." The bluntness of his words struck Rebecca like a physical blow, mainly because they were true. Lily's breathing had gotten noticeably worse just in the 15 minutes they'd been here. The wheezing was audible now, a soft whistling sound with each exhale that made Rebecca's chest tighten with panic. "I'm a parent too," the man continued, his voice softening again. "Well, I was. My daughter had severe allergies. I understand what it's like to feel helpless when your child can't breathe properly. Please, let me do this small thing." There was something in the way he said it, some depth of understanding in his eyes that made Rebecca believe he truly did understand. This wasn't pity. This was empathy from someone who'd stood where she was standing. "I'll pay you back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promise. Every penny. It might take time, but I will." The man smiled slightly and gestured toward the pharmacy counter. "We can discuss that later if you insist. But right now, let's get your daughter what she needs, please." Rebecca felt her resistance crumbling. What choice did she have, really? Pride wouldn't help Lily breathe. Stubbornness wouldn't open her airways. She looked down at her daughter, who was watching this exchange with wide, confused eyes, and made the decision that any mother would make. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. I don't know what else to say except thank you." "That's more than enough," the man said. They walked back to the counter together, where Tom the pharmacist looked up with surprise. The man simply handed over a black credit card, the kind Rebecca had only seen in movies, and said, "The prescription for the young lady, please." Tom's eyebrows rose slightly as he looked at the card, then at the man, then at Rebecca. But he was professional enough not to comment. He ran the card, and Rebecca watched in surreal disbelief as the transaction went through without a hitch. $847.32, paid in less than 30 seconds. As Tom began bagging the medication, Rebecca turned to her mysterious benefactor, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks despite her earlier promise to herself. "I don't even know your name," she said. "How can I thank you properly? How can I ever repay this?" The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into her hand. "My name is David Chen, and you don't need to repay anything. But if you ever need help, for your daughter or anything else, you call that number. Promise me." Rebecca looked down at the card, but her vision was too blurred with tears to read it properly. She clutched it like a lifeline, nodding. "I promise." "Thank you, David. Thank you so much." "Ma'am, here's your prescription," Tom said, holding out a white paper bag. "There are instructions inside. Make sure she takes the full course, even if she starts feeling better." Rebecca took the bag with shaking hands, then turned back to David, but he was already walking away, moving toward the counter to pick up whatever prescription he'd been waiting for. She wanted to stop him, to say more, to somehow make him understand the magnitude of what he'd just done, but Lily tugged at her sleeve, and her daughter's needs took priority over everything else. "Come on, baby," Rebecca said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Let's get you home and get this medicine started." As they walked to their car, Lily leaning heavily against her mother's side, Rebecca kept glancing back at the pharmacy. Through the glass doors, she could see David at the counter, conducting his business as if he hadn't just saved a child's life, as if $850 was nothing more than pocket change, as if acts of extraordinary kindness were just part of his everyday routine. The business card felt heavy in her pocket, full of unspoken possibilities and questions. Who was this man? Why had he helped them? And what did he mean when he said to call if they ever needed anything? But those questions would have to wait. Right now, Rebecca had a daughter to take care of, medicine to administer, and a breathing treatment to set up. The rest could come later. As she buckled Lily into her car seat and heard her daughter's labored breathing, Rebecca sent up a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had put David Chen in line behind her at that exact moment. Sometimes, she thought, miracles came disguised as strangers in navy suits carrying black credit cards and even bigger hearts. The apartment was quiet, except for the steady hiss of the nebulizer. Rebecca sat on the edge of Lily's bed, watching the mist rise from the small plastic mask covering her daughter's nose and mouth. It had been 2 hours since they'd left the pharmacy, and already the change was remarkable. The blue tinge had faded from Lily's lips. Her breathing, while still labored, had lost that terrifying wheeze that had kept Rebecca awake for the past 2 nights. "Better?" Rebecca asked softly, smoothing her daughter's hair back from her forehead. Lily nodded, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. The struggle to breathe had worn her out completely. Rebecca knew that soon her daughter would sleep, and sleep deeply, finally getting the rest her body desperately needed. As the nebulizer continued its work, Rebecca's hand drifted to her pocket, fingers closing around the business card that had been burning a hole there since they'd left the pharmacy. She hadn't looked at it yet, not properly. Between getting Lily home, setting up the nebulizer, giving her the first dose of the oral medication, and making her some soup that she barely touched, there hadn't been a moment to stop and think. But now, as Lily's breathing evened out and her eyes finally closed in sleep, Rebecca carefully removed the mask and turned off the machine. She pulled the blankets up to her daughter's chin, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and tiptoed out of the room, leaving the door cracked open just enough to hear if Lily called for her. In the tiny living room of their 2-bedroom apartment, Rebecca finally allowed herself to collapse onto the worn couch. The cushions sagged beneath her, familiar and comfortable despite their age. This couch had been her mother's before it was hers. The coffee table had come from a yard sale. The television was 7 years old, and sometimes the color went funny. But it was home, and it was theirs. And until today, she'd thought she was doing okay at keeping it all together. She pulled out the business card with trembling hands. The card was thick, expensive feeling with raised lettering that her fingers could trace. Simple and elegant. In the center, it read, David Chen, Chief Executive Officer. Below that, Chen Pharmaceuticals. And at the bottom, a phone number and an email address. Rebecca stared at it for a long moment, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. Chen Pharmaceuticals. She knew that name. Everyone knew that name. They made some of the most commonly prescribed medications in the country, including the very medicine that was now helping Lily breathe. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone and typed the name into the search bar. David Chen. The results flooded her screen. Article after article, photograph after photograph. The man from the pharmacy, looking polished and professional in corporate headshots, The man who had paid for Lily's medication without blinking was apparently worth billions. With a B, billions of dollars. Rebecca's apartment suddenly felt very small. She scrolled through the articles, each one adding another layer of impossibility to what had happened. David Chen had founded his pharmaceutical company 20 years ago. After, according to one article, his younger sister died from complications of diabetes. She couldn't afford her insulin consistently, and during a period when she was rationing her doses, she'd gone into diabetic ketoacidosis and never recovered. She was only 19. After her death, David had sold everything he owned, gone back to school for biochemistry, and dedicated his life to making medications more affordable. His company had become successful not in spite of its lower prices, but because of them. Volume sales, the articles explained, combined with efficient manufacturing processes and a business model that prioritized access over maximum profit margins. There were photos of him at charity events, speaking at healthcare conferences, touring manufacturing facilities. In one picture, he was handing an oversized check to a children's hospital. In another, he was sitting on the floor playing with kids at a clinic in a low-income neighborhood. But what struck Rebecca most was a quote from an interview he'd given 2 years ago. "I don't make medicine for profit margins on a spreadsheet. I make it for people. Real people with real families who shouldn't have to choose between rent and staying alive. Every time someone tells me they can't afford their medication, I see my sister's face. I see the system that failed her. And I recommit to doing better." Rebecca set her phone down, her hands covering her mouth as tears spilled over again. This man, this incredibly wealthy and powerful man, had been standing in line behind her at a regular neighborhood pharmacy. Not at some exclusive medical center or private pharmacy that probably catered to people like him. Just the regular Walgreens on 5th Street where Rebecca always went, because it was close to Lily's school, and he'd helped them. Not because he had to. Not for publicity or tax write-offs or any of the cynical reasons Rebecca had learned to expect from the world. He'd helped because he saw a mother struggling and a child suffering, and he'd been there before. He understood. She picked up the card again, reading the phone number. Should she call? Text? Email? What did you even say to someone like that? Thank you felt inadequate. The words existed nowhere in the English language that could properly express what his gesture meant. Rebecca glanced at the clock. 7:30 at night. Too late to call, probably. Even if she could work up the courage, she set the card carefully on the coffee table, propped up against a stack of overdue bills she'd been trying not to think about. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How's Lily? Did you get the medicine?" Rebecca typed back, "She's sleeping. Breathing much better. Got the medicine." The response came quickly. "Thank God, how much do you need?" "I can give you 60 from this month's check." Rebecca's throat tightened. $60 was probably the difference between her mother eating properly or not for the next few weeks. She texted back, "Don't need anything, Mama, someone helped us." Long story. "I'll tell you tomorrow." There was a pause then. "Someone helped?" "Who?" Rebecca looked at the business card again. Even typing it out felt surreal. A man at the pharmacy. He paid for it. He owns a pharmaceutical company. "I'll explain when I see you. Thank you for offering. I love you." Her mother's response was a string of praying hands and heart emojis, followed by, "God sends angels when we need them most." Rebecca wasn't particularly religious. Hadn't been since the divorce, when all of Daniel's church friends had sided with him, and made her feel like the failure of her marriage was somehow divine punishment. But sitting there in her small apartment with her daughter breathing peacefully for the first time in days, she thought maybe her mother was right. Maybe angels did show up sometimes. Maybe they wore expensive suits and carried black credit cards. She spent the next hour drafting an email to David Chen. She wrote and deleted, trying to find words that didn't sound either too formal or too casual, too gushing or too cold. How did you thank someone for saving your child's life? How did you communicate the depth of gratitude for a gesture that changed everything? Finally, she settled on something simple. "Dear Mr. Chen, I'm the woman from the pharmacy today with the daughter who needed asthma medication. I don't have adequate words to thank you for what you did. You saved my daughter's life today, truly. She's breathing peacefully now because of your kindness. I looked up your company and read about your sister. I'm so sorry for your loss, but I want you to know that her memory is living on through the good you do. You saw us in our moment of desperation and you helped. No questions asked. That kind of compassion is rare. I will pay you back every cent, though it may take some time. Please send me your information and I'll set up a payment plan. Beyond the money, I want you to know that you've restored my faith that good people still exist in this world. Thank you isn't enough. But it's all I have, with deepest gratitude. Rebecca Torres. She read it 5 times, changed a few words. Then before she could overthink it anymore, she hit send. The whoosh sound as the email departed felt momentous, like she was launching something into the universe that she couldn't take back. Rebecca set her phone down and went to check on Lily. Her daughter was sprawled across the twin bed, one arm flung over her head, mouth slightly open. The sound of her breathing was clear and even. No wheezing, no struggling. Just normal, beautiful, healthy breathing. Rebecca allowed herself to sink onto the floor beside the bed, her back against the wall, and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. The terror of not being able to afford medicine. The shame of standing at that counter with no solution. The desperate helplessness of watching your child suffer and being unable to fix it. And then, impossibly, the relief. The gratitude. The overwhelming emotion of unexpected rescue. She must have dozed off there on the floor because she woke to her phone buzzing in her pocket. She scrambled to pull it out, her neck stiff from the awkward position. The screen showed an email notification from David Chen. Her heart hammered as she opened it. Dear Rebecca, thank you for your email. I'm glad to hear your daughter is resting well. There's nothing more frightening than watching a child struggle to breathe, and I'm relieved I was able to help. Please don't worry about paying me back. Consider it a gift, one parent to another. What I spent today is nothing compared to what your daughter's health is worth. I read your email address and see you work in medical billing. If you don't mind me asking, is that at a hospital or private practice? The reason I ask is that I'm always looking for people who understand healthcare from the patient side. People who know what families go through when they're trying to navigate insurance costs and care. If you'd ever be interested in talking about opportunities at Chen Pharmaceuticals, I'd love to have a conversation. No pressure, no obligations, just a conversation. Either way, please don't hesitate to reach out if you or your daughter need anything. I meant what I said about the number on my card. It goes to my personal cell. Warmly, David. Rebecca read the email 3 times, each time certain she must be misunderstanding. Was he offering her a job? An interview? Just a conversation? What did opportunities mean when it came from the CEO of a billion-dollar company? She was a medical billing clerk. 2 part-time jobs, one at a small dental office and one at a physical therapy clinic. She dropped out of college 12 years ago when she got pregnant with Lily. She had no degree, no impressive credentials, no connections. She knew how to code procedures and argue with insurance companies and explain to patients why their bill was so high. That was it. What could she possibly offer someone like David Chen? But even as the doubts crowded her mind, another part of her, the part that had kept fighting through the divorce and the poverty and the endless struggle, whispered, maybe this is your chance. Maybe this is the door opening that you've been praying for. She typed a response, keeping it brief. Mr. Chen, you're very generous. I would be honored to have a conversation with you about opportunities. I'm free most evenings after 6 or weekends when my daughter is with my mother. Please let me know what works for your schedule. Thank you again for everything. Rebecca. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came back in less than 5 minutes. How about coffee this Saturday at 10 a.m.? There's a cafe near my office, Blue Sky Coffee on Madison Street. If that works for you, I'll have my assistant send you the details. Rebecca's fingers flew across the keyboard. Saturday at 10 a.m. works perfectly. Thank you. She set her phone down and pressed her hands to her face, trying to process the surreal turn her life had taken in the span of a single day. This morning she'd woken up to a sick daughter and an empty bank account. Tonight she was going to sleep with her daughter breathing peacefully and a job interview, or conversation or whatever this was, scheduled with a billionaire CEO. Life could change so fast. She'd learned that the hard way when Daniel left, when her world collapsed into struggle and survival mode. But maybe, just maybe, life could change fast in the other direction too. Maybe the same speed that brought disaster could also bring hope. Rebecca pulled herself up from the floor, her joints creaking in protest. She needed to shower, to eat something, to do all the normal human things she'd neglected in the crisis of the day. But first she stood in the doorway of Lily's room one more time, watching her daughter sleep. "We're going to be okay," she whispered into the darkness. "Things are going to get better, baby girl. I can feel it." And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rebecca actually believed it. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Rebecca change her outfit 4 times. She stood in front of her closet, which wasn't saying much since the entire thing could fit in a corner of most people's bedrooms, and stared at her limited options with growing panic. What did you wear to coffee with a billionaire CEO? Her work clothes were too casual. Mostly scrubs and comfortable shoes for long days on her feet. Her church dress, the one nice outfit she owned, felt too formal for a coffee shop. She finally settled on dark jeans that didn't have any worn spots and a simple blue sweater her mother had given her last Christmas. Professional enough to show respect, casual enough not to look like she was trying too hard. "Mama, you look pretty," Lily said from the doorway, already dressed in her favorite purple shirt covered in butterflies. Her breathing had been perfect all week, the medicine working exactly as it should. The color had returned to her cheeks, and she'd even asked to go to the park yesterday, racing around the playground like she hadn't been struggling for air just days before. "Thank you, baby," Rebecca said, pulling her daughter in for a hug. "You remember you're going to spend the morning with Grandma, right?" "I know," Lily said, drawing out the word in that way 7-year-olds did when they thought you were being silly. "She's making pancakes. The ones with the chocolate chips." Rebecca smiled despite her nerves. Her mother knew exactly how to make everything feel special, even a regular Saturday morning. "Well then, you're having a much better morning than me. Are you nervous about your meeting?" Lily asked, her brown eyes wide and perceptive in that way that sometimes surprised Rebecca. Her daughter was more observant than most kids her age, probably because she'd had to grow up a little faster than Rebecca would have liked. "A little bit," Rebecca admitted, "but nervous in a good way. Like when you're about to do something important." "The man from the pharmacy?" Lily asked. "The one who helped us?" Rebecca nodded. They'd talked about it a few times this week, Rebecca trying to explain in 7-year-old terms what had happened and why it mattered. Lily's takeaway had been simple and pure. He was nice. Like a superhero, but without a cape. "Yeah, that man. His name is Mr. Chen, and he wants to talk to me about maybe working for his company." "Are you going to say yes?" Lily asked. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. First I have to hear what he wants to talk about. It might not even be a real job offer. It might just be a conversation." But even as she said it, Rebecca felt the flutter of possibility in her chest. All week she'd been playing the email over in her head, analyzing every word, trying not to get her hopes up while simultaneously unable to stop hoping. They arrived at her mother's house 20 minutes later. Rosa Torres lived in a small bungalow about 15 minutes from Rebecca's apartment, the same house where Rebecca had grown up. The front porch still had the swing where Rebecca used to read on summer afternoons, and the garden still bloomed with roses that her mother tended with careful devotion. "There's my beautiful girl," Rosa said, opening the door before they even reached it. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair she kept in a neat bun and eyes that saw everything. She swept Lily up in a hug before turning those knowing eyes on Rebecca. "And you, let me look at you." Rebecca stood still while her mother circled her, adjusting her collar, smoothing a strand of hair. "Good. You look professional, but not like you're trying too hard. And you're not wearing that awful perfume Jessica gave you, thank God." "Mama," Rebecca protested, but she was smiling. "What? I tell the truth. That perfume smells like a funeral home." Rosa squeezed Rebecca's hand. "You're going to do great. Just be yourself. That's what he saw at the pharmacy, right? The real you. So show him that again. What if I'm not qualified for whatever he wants? Then you learn." "You think I knew how to be a nurse when I started?" "No, I learned. You can learn anything if you want it bad enough." Rosa's voice was firm, brooking no argument. This was the voice that had gotten Rebecca through the divorce, through the hardest nights of single motherhood, through every moment when giving up seemed easier than going on. "Now go, don't be late. Lily and I have pancakes to make." The drive to Blue Sky Coffee took 20 minutes, which gave Rebecca plenty of time to spiral through every possible disaster scenario. What if she said something stupid? What if he realized she was way out of her depth? What if this was all some weird mistake and he'd meant to email someone else? She found parking 2 blocks away and walked slowly toward the cafe, trying to calm her racing heart. The morning was crisp and clear, one of those perfect autumn days where the air smelled like fallen leaves and possibility. Madison Street was in the nice part of town, the part where coffee cost $6 and people walked tiny dogs wearing sweaters. Blue Sky Coffee had floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick walls. Through the glass, Rebecca could see David already seated at a corner table, looking at his phone. He was dressed casually today, jeans and a black sweater, looking more like someone's professor dad than a CEO worth billions. Somehow that made it worse. If he'd been in a suit, she could have maintained the mental distance of a formal business meeting. But this felt personal, intimate almost. Rebecca took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and walked in. The smell of coffee and fresh pastries washed over her. David looked up immediately as if he'd been watching for her and smiled. He stood up, extending his hand. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. Can I get you something to drink?" "Just a regular coffee would be great," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "Black is fine. Are you sure? Their vanilla latte is excellent." "Okay, sure."
"A vanilla latte, then." David went to order while Rebecca sat down, taking in the comfortable leather chairs and the art on the walls.
This was definitely not the kind of coffee shop she usually frequented. Her regular spot was the Dunkin' Donuts near work where coffee was $2, and nobody cared if you sat there for an hour doing paperwork. David returned with 2 large cups and a plate of pastries. "I didn't know if you'd eaten, so I grabbed a few things. The almond croissants here are amazing." "Thank you," Rebecca said, accepting the latte. The cup was warm in her hands, comforting. "This is a really nice place. It's one of my favorites. The owner is a woman who worked 3 jobs to save up enough to open it. She reminds me why I do what I do." David took a sip of his coffee, seeming completely at ease in a way Rebecca envied. "So how's Lily doing? Still breathing well?" "She's perfect," Rebecca said, and felt herself relax slightly. Talking about Lily was easy. It's like night and day. She went to the park yesterday and ran around for 2 hours straight. I haven't seen her that active in months. "That's wonderful." "Truly." David's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes. "I have to tell you, Rebecca, I haven't stopped thinking about that day at the pharmacy. Not because of the money, that's irrelevant, but because of what you said or didn't say. You were terrified and desperate, but you never once got angry. You never demanded anything or acted entitled. You just tried to figure out a solution." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "I don't think desperation leaves much room for anger in the moment. I was just trying to survive." "Exactly," David said, leaning forward. "And that's what I want to talk to you about. You mentioned in your email that you work in medical billing. Tell me about that." Rebecca wrapped her hands around her cup, grateful for something to hold. "I work 2 part-time jobs, one at a dental office and one at a physical therapy clinic. Basically, I code procedures, submit claims to insurance companies, and then spend a lot of time on the phone arguing with them about why they should pay what they're supposed to pay. And then I have to call patients and explain why their insurance didn't cover something and try to set up payment plans they can actually afford. That must be frustrating. It's soul-crushing sometimes," Rebecca admitted. "You have people who did everything right. They have insurance, they went to in-network providers, they followed all the rules. And then they get a bill for thousands of dollars because of some technicality or loophole. And I'm the one who has to make that call and listen to them panic or cry or get angry. I'm the face of a system that's broken even though I didn't break it." David nodded slowly. "How often do people tell you they can't afford their bills?" "Every single day. Multiple times a day." Rebecca felt the familiar weight of those conversations settling on her shoulders. "I've gotten good at finding payment plans, at negotiating reductions when I can. But there's only so much I can do within the system. What would you do if you could do more? If you had the authority and resources to actually fix things?" Rebecca blinked. Nobody had ever asked her that before. In her jobs, she was the lowest person on the hierarchy, the one who implemented policies but never made them. "I guess I'd start by making the system more transparent. People don't understand their bills because they're intentionally complicated. Every procedure has a code. Every code has multiple possible prices depending on insurance, and nobody tells you what anything actually costs until after it's done. It's designed to confuse people." "Go on," David said, his eyes intent on her face. "And I'd create better payment options that don't destroy people's credit or require them to choose between medication and rent. I'd have real humans available to talk through bills, people who actually have the authority to make adjustments, not call centers in other countries reading from scripts, but people who can listen and help." Rebecca paused, realizing she was probably talking too much. Sorry, you got me started on a subject I have a lot of feelings about. Don't apologize. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. David set down his coffee. Rebecca, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you appreciate directness. I want to create a new position at Chen Pharmaceuticals, Director of Patient Access and Advocacy. The person in this role would oversee programs to help patients afford their medications, navigate insurance issues, and connect with resources. They'd work directly with me to develop policies that put patients first. Rebecca's heart started pounding. That sounds amazing. I want you to consider taking the position. The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the catch, for the moment when this turned out to be something other than what it seemed. Me, she finally managed. Mr. Chen, I don't have a college degree. I've never managed anyone. I've never worked for a company bigger than 20 people. I'm not qualified for something like that. You're more qualified than you think, David said calmly. You have something that can't be taught in business school. You have lived experience. You've been on the other side of the counter, the desperate side, the side that every policy and procedure impacts. You understand what families go through because you're living it. That perspective is invaluable. But surely you have people with degrees and experience who could do this better. I have plenty of people with MBAs who can analyze data and create spreadsheets. What I don't have is someone who can look at a policy and immediately tell me how it will affect a single mother working 2 jobs, someone who knows what it's like to choose between rent and medicine, someone who will fight for patients because they remember being a patient. David's voice was passionate, now animated. I can teach you the business side. I can't teach empathy and authentic understanding. Rebecca felt tears prickling at her eyes. This is a lot to take in, I know. And I'm not expecting an answer today. What I'd like is for you to come to the office, meet some of the team, see what we do. No commitment, no pressure. Just come see if it feels right. David pulled out his phone. I'm looking at my calendar. Could you come by on Tuesday afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? I work until 4 on Tuesdays, Rebecca said automatically, then caught herself. But I could probably take the afternoon off. My boss is understanding. Perfect. I'll have my assistant send you all the details. David smiled. And Rebecca? The salary for this position is $85,000 to start, with full benefits including platinum health insurance for you and Lily. There's also tuition reimbursement if you want to finish your degree. $85,000. Rebecca's current 2 jobs combined brought in just under $30,000 a year. She couldn't speak, couldn't process what that number would mean for her and Lily. No more choosing between bills. No more panic at the pharmacy. No more falling asleep worrying about how to make rent. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll come Tuesday. That's all I'm asking for now. Rebecca nodded, not trusting her voice. They talked for another hour, about easier things. David asked about Lily's interests, her school, her favorite subjects. He told Rebecca about his own daughter, grown now and working as a doctor. He talked about his sister, about how her death had shaped everything he'd built. And slowly, Rebecca began to see that this wasn't just a job offer. This was a mission, and he wanted her to be part of it. When they finally said goodbye outside the cafe, David shook her hand again. Thank you for taking a chance on this conversation. I know it's overwhelming. Thank you for seeing something in me I didn't know was there, Rebecca said. She walked back to her car in a daze, the morning sunlight feeling different somehow, brighter and full of promise. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How did it go? Rebecca typed back. I think my life just changed. She sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine, letting herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. 1 week ago, she'd been at the lowest point, unable to afford her daughter's medicine. Today, she was looking at a future she'd never dared to imagine. Sometimes life changed in an instant. Sometimes strangers became angels. Sometimes the universe conspired to lift you up right when you thought you were going under for the last time. Rebecca drove to her mother's house with tears streaming down her face. But for once, they were tears of hope. Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca stood in front of the glass tower that housed Chen Pharmaceuticals, trying to convince her stomach to stop doing somersaults. The building was downtown, all gleaming windows and steel, the kind of place she'd walked past 100 times but never imagined actually entering. A fountain bubbled near the entrance, and well-dressed people moved in and out of the revolving doors with the confidence of those who belonged there. She'd called in sick to both her jobs, something she never did. But this felt too important to risk being late because of her shift running over. Her mother had taken Lily for the afternoon, not before hugging Rebecca so tight she could barely breathe and whispering a prayer over her in Spanish. "You've got this, Mija," Rosa had said, pressing her worn rosary beads into Rebecca's hand. "Keep these in your pocket. For courage." Now Rebecca touched those beads through the fabric of her jacket pocket as she approached the entrance. She'd worn the same outfit as Saturday, figuring if it was good enough for coffee, it was good enough for this. Through the glass doors, she could see a sleek lobby with marble floors and a security desk. Here goes nothing, she thought, and pushed through the doors. The lobby was even more intimidating up close. Her shoes clicked on the polished marble, each step echoing in a way that made her hyper-aware of herself. A security guard looked up from behind a curved desk that probably cost more than her car. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone neutral but not unfriendly. "I'm Rebecca Torres. I have a 2 o'clock appointment with Mr. Chen." The guard checked his computer, then his eyebrows rose slightly. "Ah yes, Ms. Torres, Mr. Chen's expecting you. I'll let his assistant know you're here. If you'll just sign in and take this visitor badge." Rebecca fumbled with the electronic signature pad, her name coming out as a shaky scribble. The guard handed her a clip-on badge with her name already printed on it, which seemed impossibly efficient. Had they known she was coming that precisely? "The elevators are just over there," the guard said, pointing. "You'll want the 42nd floor. Someone will meet you when you arrive." 42nd floor, of course. Rebecca walked to the elevator bank, pressed the up button, and watched the numbers descend. When the doors opened, she stepped inside along with 2 men in expensive suits who were deep in conversation about quarterly projections. She pressed 42 and stood in the corner, feeling like an imposter. The elevator was fast, so fast her ears popped. The 2 men got off on 28, leaving her alone for the final ascent. Rebecca watched the numbers climb and tried to remember how to breathe normally. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. Modern furniture in shades of gray and blue created conversation areas. A massive piece of abstract art covered one wall, and behind a sleek desk sat a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Rebecca?" the woman asked, standing up. "I'm Patricia, Mr. Chen's executive assistant. It's so nice to meet you. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee, tea?" "Water would be great, thank you," Rebecca managed, her mouth suddenly dry. Patricia handed her a bottle of water from a small refrigerator that was built seamlessly into the desk. "Mr. Chen is just finishing up a call, but he should be ready in just a few minutes. Please have a seat. Make yourself comfortable." Rebecca sat on one of the modern chairs, which was surprisingly comfortable despite looking like it belonged in an art gallery. Through a glass wall, she could see into a large open office space where dozens of people worked at standing desks and regular desks. Some wearing headphones, others gathered around whiteboards covered in diagrams and notes. "First time here?" Patricia asked, her tone conversational. "Is it that obvious?" Rebecca said with a nervous laugh. "Not at all. I just know that Mr. Chen doesn't usually have visitors who aren't already familiar with the office." Patricia leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, he's been talking about you all week. Whatever you said at coffee on Saturday really made an impression." Before Rebecca could process that information, a door opened and David appeared. Today he was in business casual, slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked happy to see her, his whole face lighting up with a genuine smile. "Rebecca, you made it. Come on back." He gestured to his office. "Patricia, could you ask Karen and Dr. Patel to join us in about 10 minutes? David's office was large but not ostentatious. Yes, there was a massive desk and that incredible view, but there were also family photos everywhere. His daughter at various ages, what must have been his sister, young and smiling. Pictures of him at clinics and hospitals, always surrounded by people. One wall was covered with letters, dozens of them, pinned up like a collage. "Those are from patients," David said, noticing where she was looking. "People who've written to thank us for making their medications affordable. I keep them here to remind me why we do this work. Some days you need that reminder." Rebecca moved closer to read a few. They were handwritten, some in shaky elderly script, others in the careful printing of children. Stories of lives saved, of hope restored, of gratitude for medications that didn't cost a fortune. Her eyes landed on one from a mother whose son had epilepsy, thanking Chen Pharmaceuticals for pricing his seizure medication at a rate she could afford. The woman wrote, "You gave me my son's future back." "These are incredible," Rebecca whispered. "Every single one represents someone who could have been my sister. Someone who might have died or suffered needlessly if medications had been priced like they are at most companies." David's voice was quiet, but intense. "That's what this is really about. Not profits or stock prices, though we do fine on both. It's about these letters. These people." There was a soft knock at the door. Patricia poked her head in. "Karen and Dr. Patel are here." "Perfect. Send them in." 2 women entered. The first was in her 40s, black, with natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, and glasses that gave her a scholarly look. She wore a pantsuit and carried a tablet. The second was Indian, probably in her 50s, with gray streaking through her dark hair and warm brown eyes. She was dressed more casually in slacks and a cardigan. "Rebecca, I'd like you to meet Karen Williams, our Director of Operations, and Dr. Anjali Patel, who heads up our Research and Development Division." David gestured to each woman. "Ladies, this is Rebecca Torres." Karen extended her hand first. "It's wonderful to meet you. David's told us about your background and his vision for this new position. I have to say I'm excited about the possibility." "As am I," Dr. Patel added, her accent carrying the lilt of someone who'd grown up speaking another language. "We've needed someone in this role for a long time." They all sat down in a comfortable seating area by the windows. Rebecca felt less nervous with other women in the room, though she was still acutely aware that these were highly accomplished people, and she was just a billing clerk. "Rebecca," David began, "I asked Karen and Anjali to join us because if you take this position, you'd be working closely with both of them. I thought it was important for you to meet them and hear directly about how this role would function within the company." Karen jumped in, her energy infectious. "So here's the thing. Chen Pharmaceuticals has always prided itself on affordable pricing. That's our brand, our mission. But we've realized there's a gap between affordable and accessible. A medication can be priced reasonably, but if someone doesn't have insurance, or their insurance won't cover it, or they don't know about our assistance programs, it might as well be $1 million. That's where you would come in," Dr. Patel continued. "We need someone who can bridge that gap, someone who understands the patient experience intimately and can advocate for changes in how we do things." "What would that actually look like day to day?" Rebecca asked, finding her voice. Karen pulled up something on her tablet. "We're envisioning several key areas. First, you'd oversee our patient assistance program, which currently helps about